our field teams look at they look at these as tools. It's no different than any of the other tools that they have on site. But the guys that are out there busting it on the site in the weather, in the cold, day in, day out, that's really where we make the greatest impact on their quality of life. Just talking with a lot of our superintendents, they see that it's making not only their life a little bit better, but it's making the project better. And if it made that example a little bit better, that is something they want to strive for.
Welcome back to Built Different, a podcast and community choosing to approach innovation differently. I'm Grant Hagan.
I'm Brian Vizzaretta.
And we're on a mission to rewrite the narrative around what innovation truly means.
Last season, we did 12 episodes more focused on the field.
And this season, we packed up our gear, joining teams in site trailers, offices, and even a few podcast studios, where we focused on the executive level and how innovation is making an impact within their organizations.
New this season, we're introducing live streams to invite you to join the conversation.
Also, we want to equip you by providing show recaps from each episode in our new Built Different download.
Join us August 7th as we continue this journey together.
Think different, be different, and build different. Well, welcome back to the Built Different podcast powered by Drone Deploy Instruction Site. I'm joined with Mr. Brian Vizzaretta today and a couple of our friends from Choate Construction. Thank you all for coming in with us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I should say, you guys are hosting us. We are invading your office space. If you're not watching us and you're only listening, we are actually in Choate's office here in Atlanta. So thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, this is super fun. We took over their VDC room. And so if you're not watching, we have all these projects in the background, aerial videos of projects, logistics plans, and of course some great final project photos here too. So this is honestly better than Brian and I's home setups for a podcast setup. So thank you all for having us. So one, would love for you guys to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience here, and then we're going to get into some really good stuff just around technology, implementation, and what it looks like from your guys' role specifically, and we'll get into some stuff with you guys here at Choate. But Todd, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So Todd Barrett, I'm director of VDC here at Choate. Been with Choate for, going on. I just had my 13-year anniversary, which is crazy. Background is in design. I'm an architect by training. Came over to the GC side when I came to Choate and never turned back. So, So head up all the innovation, all of our BIM, VDC, field technology, and more so over the last couple of years, really been focusing on the strategy, training, implementation, and adoption kind of side of it.
Love it. David?
Yeah, so my name's David Talley. I'm an assistant project manager here with Choate. Been here now for about 4 years. Really roundabout pathway the way I got into construction. So was a dietitian for about 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Wanted a little bit of a change, so went back to school, got a construction management degree, and then have been here with Choate since I finished up. So
Okay. And are both of you guys from Atlanta? I should have asked that at the beginning.
Roundabout, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Tell us a little bit about Choate, too, for folks that are tuning in and maybe aren't in the Southeast and haven't heard of you guys. Give us a little background of Choate.
Yeah, sure. So Choate, we're obviously general contractor, commercial construction, all commercial construction, very diverse project types, 6 offices, about 1.6 billion in construction last year. And we're an ESOP. We became an ESOP now, 7? I think we're on our
4. I was joined.
Year 7, which was a big change for us,
Yeah.
Culturally. 100% employee owned, which is awesome.
ESOP, for folks that don't know. Give us too many acronyms in construction.
Yeah, employee stock owner program or ownership program. So basically, all of us, we do have a CEO and all those kind of the executives, but each of us is an employee owner, gets shares in the company and driving the profitability and the success. So kind of a big cultural thing for us here. Lots of different project types. I'm not sure what else to really say.
And I guess tell us a little bit about how you got to the roles in which you're in now. So David, obviously a project manager or assistant project manager, and Todd, a little bit of kind of your role as well. Like, give us a little bit of a story of how you got into the roles that you're in now.
Yeah, so when I was wrapping up school, I ended up joining Choate as an intern.
Okay.
Is where I kind of started with the company. Was an intern for about a semester while I was there. came in as a project engineer. Is what I came in and have worked my way up to an assistant project manager over the time that I've been here.
And what projects have you kind of been on in the tenure that you've been here?
So I've done a couple of projects down at Chick-fil-A headquarters. I've done childcare center, done a parking deck. I've been on a couple of Amazon projects, everything from a last mile distribution center to a sortation facility, and now currently working on Cottrell Trailers, which is a trailer manufacturing facility. Rather large project. We're currently clearing out about 110 acres to put in over a 500,000 square foot manufacturing facility.
So you can thank David for all the way back in the Chick-fil-A days of the folks that are enjoying all the great chicken from them. Atlanta is home to Chick-fil-A for those that don't know that. So Todd, how did you kind of land in the role that you're in? And
Yeah, so I really was brought here because I knew BIM, I knew Revit, I knew that side of it from being on the production side and design, and was just kind of a nerd in general. Was really interested in kind of where, I remember reading an article when I think it was back in 2004, 2005, right after BIM was coming on the scene on the design side, and it was like there's this future for a BIM manager, kind of role, and kind of was always intrigued by that. So really just kind of picked up, became like the person who implemented that. And then when I came to Choate, I was literally the BIM guy. Like I'd ride up in the elevator, be like, "Oh yeah, you're the BIM guy, right?" And so it took a little bit of time to kind of get our bearings and kind of say, well, what are we really trying to kind of achieve here? And so worked on projects, was really the main coordinator in Atlanta, and then we started picking up some other coordinators in the other offices and things. But so my role kind of changed, like I said, probably over the last 2 to 3 years, as I moved more onto the corporate side, and then started overseeing kind of the managers in each office.
Yeah, I love the BIM guy.
That's a turning point in a company.
Yeah.
When the company stops saying BIM guy and goes to like VDC manager, but no matter who you are at a certain level, you are the BIM guy.
I feel like I was not the BIM guy at the company I came from, but I know the BIM guy, and it's funny. Everyone kind of is like a one place removed from the BIM guy in some of those roles. So awesome. Well, one thing we really wanted to get into and talk about with you guys is, so one, I love just kind of the diversity of your guys' roles, right? So on a project, use technology, see its benefits and the values that it brings to you. And Todd, obviously, like coming up and really helping push this narrative forward of, hey, this isn't just a toy. This isn't just something that we're trying to add on. Like, hey, this is like helping you in the roles that you're in. I want to get into a little bit of your guys' just kind of how you've gotten to the point that you're at now, with that kind of being the culture of Choate, right? So a lot of the folks that tune in and listen with us are really interested of, how do I do that at my company? How do I take it from this idea of a nice to have to like, hey, now people are asking like, hey, what do I need? How do I do this? What are the other things that are on the horizon? And Todd, you were tapped on the shoulder to come on here, one, because of, I think, your vision of what you've done to get Choate to this point, and not having it just be like, oh, this is nice to have. Maybe we do this stuff on the side. Like, no, like you guys, I mean, I'm looking up at these screens. I've mentioned this a couple times, but like this is real world stuff. This isn't just stuff you put in interviews and things like that. So I would love to get a little bit of your guys' background. Maybe start kind of with you, Todd, of just your vision around how that's shifted in the mindset of not only folks at the executive level, kind of with what you're doing, and then also down to the project level too, David, with some of the stuff you're doing too. And would love to kind of camp there and start.
Yeah. So, thinking back, to 2010 when I started here and was brought on, and kind of trying to understand what the role was, what we were trying to get to, and a lot of it was, goes all the way back to Miller Choate. Our then at the time CEO, now retired, he had the vision and said, he was always a big technology proponent, said, we need to be doing this. This is how we're going to build in the future. And so it just really was having that support from the top. That would be one of the biggest pieces of advice I could say that I hear from lots of different VDC managers and other, smaller GCs or up and coming that are starting to get into this, is just having that buy-in is huge. You really have to have the buy-in at all levels. And it can be tougher, when you start getting out in the field and trying to show guys, how this is going to make their life a little bit better. And so that's been the big thing for us, is understanding what's it look like from the field's perspective, and also understanding, what's at stake for the company, and what are the benefits and the ROIs and the value that this brings to not just our projects and our project teams, but really our clients. And so I've reported to several different people as I've kind of come up through the ranks, from our COO to our COA to now I report to our current COO. And the question I always get when I go to them with ideas or initiatives is, okay, what's the value? What is this going to do to make our projects better for our clients and for our project teams? And so it's not just a cool new shiny toy. And so that's the other thing I'd say, is focus not just on finding, there's so many great technologies out there that's emerging so quickly, you can't possibly keep up with it, number one. But if you do, I would say start with the user, start with the end in mind. Pretty popular term there. Start with the end in mind. Go talk to the folks that are out there. What are their pain points? And then go and find the tool sets that fit. And that we did that about 5-6 years ago. We flipped it on its head and said, you know what? We're finding these cool tools and toys, and we're trying to figure out, how do we shoehorn these into our operations, or how do we shoehorn these into our current processes? And it would kind of stick here and we kind of get some traction there. But when we started really hearing about where those pain points were, that's when we said, oh man, we need to be listening to these guys. We need to be listening to these folks that are to make their life a little bit easier and a little bit. So that's been big for us as well.
I'm curious, that conversation, what is the value that it brings, right? Was that always the question from kind of who you reported to in that kind of executive C-suite level? What questions are they asking that you are finding yourself having to give good responses to?
Yeah, obviously the one that always comes up first was the cost.
Yeah, right.
And so, but as we started talking more about that, it wasn't so much well, what's the actual cost? It's what is the payback for us? What is the value? It's is it going to save time? Is this going to help our guys get a couple hours back each week, or an hour back each week, that maybe they don't have to be on the site as late, or maybe they can do something, easier or faster, or even safer. That's a huge thing for us here, obviously, with our One Life program that we have around safety. Was, what are these tools that we can use that are going to keep guys out of harm's way? So a lot of times that's it. It's understanding what is that value proposition there.
Yeah. It's funny, more and more. The more we've been talking about, the quality of life has really been getting brought up a lot more, right? Because field teams, if it's a game of inches, you save an hour, you save an hour every week over a 52-week period. That adds up, and it's not just the hour you saved, but the mental stress and then the time of where you could have left that site that day.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about how technology has kind of played a role on quality of life from your standpoint. What type of information has it kind of allowed you to be open to, and even reduce some time that you've had to do other things?
Yeah, so quality of life, obviously, the technology that we use allows us to be able to gain information that is useful down the end, right? So we do a lot of laser scanning. One of the first projects that I was on, we actually were doing some, and it's just having that information to be able to go back and verify whether it's an embed being in the right place, or it's rebar tied the way that it's supposed to be, and detailed the way that it's supposed to be, and that type of stuff. It definitely put me on the job site sometimes a little bit later, so having to get things scanned before the concrete's put onto it. But as far as having to go back and verify, right, it saves tons of time, because you can go back and be like, boom, here it is, right? And you're not having to scan or do all these other types of things to try to get some confirmation on it. So, being able to do it as far as that way definitely helps out. And it's, just being able to be on the site and get the information that we need in a quick manner is definitely really nice. We utilize drone deploy on sites, so that's used anywhere from, being able to provide progress photos to our owners that don't necessarily get there on site. We've also utilized it to be able to back check some of our subs and things like that. So I've taken some of our 3D models that we've taken from some of our maps and are able to confirm some of the takeoffs from doing an area analysis of it and that type of stuff too. So
yeah, This idea of like quality of life and technology often don't really like get us. So maybe they do in the personal like side of life, right? It's like, hey, phones probably have increased our quality of life with connecting with individuals and staying connected in certain ways. But it's oftentimes you don't really hear that connection over to construction, right? Because it's just like, well, it's a lot of old, a lot of antiquated things, but technology wants to find its way into this industry, and yet now you're like overwhelmed with the amount of things that that you're just faced with. And a question I'm curious to ask you, Todd, a little bit is like, okay, so these waves of let's like kind of bucket technology a little bit here for just the sake of clarity. Like the first wave was kind of just this digitization of drawings, right? We were all kind of back in the day rolling out complete giant sets and folding papers over and putting void and all that kind of stuff, right? Bluebeam would say like, hey, that's clearly the kind of, let's call that the first wave, right? And then kind of second wave ish was like the mobile side of it, right? It's like, okay, well, what if we can take that to a mobile environment? And then maybe the third wave was like, okay, now that you have this collaborative PM tool, Procores and Autodesk construction, like the fourth wave that's kind of happening is this idea of reality capture, right? So we talked about laser scanning, we talked about drones, we talked about 360 cam. Like, tell me your thoughts on, is that kind of this next, let's just call it core program, core technology per se, in companies that like they should be considering if they've missed maybe those first two or three, or they're like trying to catch up into those first two or three? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely kind of looking back on all the other where we are now and how we got here. Definitely the reality capture piece, as we're starting to see, it's faster, it's quicker, it's safer. All those types of pieces we already talked about. I think we're going to see a lot more leverage of that. Just even a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with one of our director of operations about, that he had to go back to a project that was 5 years ago, which is not really that long ago. But before we were really fully utilizing like construction site and taking all those photos, or even using drones, as much as we are now. But he's like dove into a folder of we got photos of that site. It's like 5,000 photos, all numbered in sequence. No idea. Like, here's a picture of a hole in the wall. Okay, well, what room is that in? And so he's like, it's so crazy now with that, that camera and 360, like you could pinpoint that in a matter of minutes, as opposed to like hours trying to figure out what this is and where it is. And so it's that cost of entry is really low for that, and being able to get in there and start leveraging that, and the benefit is just huge, I think. And so I think that alone is going to really propel that usage, as well as the drone piece too. I mean, the autonomous piece of it, the autonomous nature, kind of that technical skill level that it takes to require to do this. Not to say that it's easy for everybody kind of thing, but it is. It's pretty easy. You go out there, you literally push a button, and the drone flies off. It does its thing, comes back, and lands at your feet. It's like, okay, no longer do we have to be as crazy with everything that we used to have to do to really keep track of it. So.
I mean, you've been on this journey for a while. I found a YouTube video this morning about 8 years ago, actually, with you and Miller talking about BIM on the commercial real estate show. If you guys are listening, but that's been a journey. You have these scenarios and all these like stories, right? But how do you qualitatively or quantitatively measure a lot of that info and like show them like this is the business impact for the business, and how do you kind of translate that to an executive level who may not be hearing all these individual stories and like okay, yes, I see a dollar value, I see it being used, but what is it actually doing for us?
Oh, that's a tough one, because it's a lot of times it's that unrecognized savings that's there. It's that the man hours that are saved. There are some ways to obviously get some of those metrics with understanding the amount of time that it takes to go find something. We did this when we implemented Procore. It was kind of like, well, they have all these great ROI metrics and everything else, and we're like, well, gosh, if we could just save that guy 30 minutes of walking from the trailer to get the drawings to the field, back and forth, or the daily report, just that time savings right there, the amount of hours that's recouped. And, you could do that on a dollar value and understand that. but it was like the time savings. Like that's where I think a lot of it is, where when we look at it, we say this is going to save people time. Again, quality of life, make their job a little bit easier. But there are those cases that I think, to answer your question, to capture examples when something does happen, and you're like, oh man, construction site really saved our hide on this one. Like we had this photo, and there was a claim made, and we were able to pull it up, and it. I mean, it's happened a few times. Like, gosh, if that had gone downstairs to legal, I mean, we're talking, a lot of hours, lawyers get involved. All of a sudden, it was like, no, literally it disappeared within 15 minutes because we were able to pull out this information or drone photo or kind of show the case.
And it kind of just dissolves, right?
Yeah. As soon as they see that, they're
doesn't
like,
happen.
oh, never mind.
Yeah.
We were mistaken.
Yeah. Would you say that's kind of the same from a job level too? Of like, are the stories the real money making values, right? It's like, you're probably not going to track how many times you didn't have to go out to the job. You're not going to track, hey, okay, start my stopwatch, and now I don't have to do, like, is that the same at the job level too? Of like, because the question I've asked folks is like, to me, the ROI is, do you want to use it on your next job or not?
Right.
Would you be disappointed if you didn't have access to these tools at next job?
Yeah,
It's like,
totally.
It's a pretty basic question. Like, how would you kind of answer that from the job level?
Yeah, and I feel it's kind of, hats off to Choate and that type of stuff, that we don't have to necessarily provide that type of quantitative of, hey, we use this, it saved us this and that. They just know it does, right? And so we're not having to, I guess, defend it to be able to use these types of things. But, they are nice to have, right? Like, there's instances, I can just think of, again, lots of different stories where somebody didn't have to get up onto a ladder to check out something because we could fly a drone up and take a look at it and take a picture and show, hey, this was done, or we don't have to do that type of stuff. And that's just been used in all sorts of circumstances where, we're able to use that technology. So, again, we're not having to necessarily quantify it because they've already bought in on it. So, but, there's lots of stories that I could bring up of having these photos and videos and that type of stuff that is just, saves you time, saves you money, and that type of stuff. So.
So, I mean, you almost do serve as like this connector, between what does the executive team want from this technology that we're about to spend money on, and also what does the field want from this technology? And those are almost two very things. Like, your focus is less how much necessarily does it cost, albeit project budget, but more necessarily like how long is it going to take me? Right. Like, is this something that's going to add more time? Is this just a reporting tool to get somebody else a dashboard that is not even sitting on this project? Or is this something that is truly like, I can use it and I will see return back, but also the return of time or the return of value needs to be so short for most people in the field, because if it doesn't give you something back probably within the first 2 weeks, it's like, I'm throwing this out. I'm not going to do this. I got other things to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've, stories like that of where you put that technology in someone's hands and, I'll check back with you in a week. And you report it and they're like, no, that thing doesn't work. This it does this. I'm like, oh, well, gosh, that's fantastic. We can go back and, talk to the vendor or talk to the technology group and kind of figure out what we want to do differently with it from a process side. And I think that's where we really start to understand where those pain points are.
I want to, I'm turning on the right blinker here a little bit to turn the corner, but walk me through like the purchasing process of technology. Like, let's take a construction site, let's take a drone deploy, just given that that's probably relevant here. Like, how did you hear about it? What was the purchasing comparison of other tools out there process? What was the buying process like? I'm going really deep here, but then like, I also want to get to the like, hey, like, what's it been like as a customer of those tools? Like, how do you evaluate some of those things? And if they are being useful with usage and feedback from teams and working with customer success, like, let's go all the way back to the beginning and take one of those two, drone deploy or construction, doesn't matter. But like, how did you hear about it? Where are the places that you're finding out about some of this technology? What eventually led you to get a price, kind of test it out? Like, I want to go back to that, because I think oftentimes Brian and I hear a lot, like, the customer journeys of folks are so different. And I think that sometimes hearing it from an example, like a company like Choate, you guys get all sorts of exposure to different types of technology, but like, what is your journey essentially of looking into software, what it can do, buying it, getting it on a job? Take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so we started using Construction Site in 2016, I believe, and
How
really
did you hear about it?
so we're part of a larger kind of peer group, Citadel National Construction Group. So we have partners all across the country. We get together we have regular monthly calls, and we do face-to-face once a year. And we got together, and people were talking about, hey, there's these new like 360 apps. There were a couple that were out there kind of in the market. It was pretty early there. I think
2016.
I think there were two at that time, and it was kind of like, well, you have this option or this option.
It was the Samsung Gear 360 days.
Yeah. It was definitely different then, and so it was. Well, gosh, how are we doing this now? Okay, cool. And so what we've kind of our process now is really just. We would typically just micro pilot it, essentially like, all right, let's try it out on one job, just kind of see what it looks like. Can we, how much is the camera? Okay, all right, let's throw this, let's put this in somebody's hands like David. Like, let's give it to David and see what he thinks. Give it a try, come back, tell us what we think. Okay, yeah, there's definitely value there. And so then kind of just taking that, up the ladder and showing, here's what it does, here's what it costs, here's how we think we could deploy it at a larger scale. And so those kind of mini pilots is really kind of how it started. That's pretty much everything that we've done here.
So let's go to your perspective. Like, okay, Todd comes to you, hey, I just heard about this tool. Here's something that's new on the horizon. Like, walk us through your mindset. Obviously, like, there's a high trust in, hey, I'm sure if Todd's sending me something that this has probably been vetted and kind of looked through, like, what do you do with that from there?
Yeah, so a lot of the way I kind of do it is they are like, hey, we got this new technology. It can be used for this, this, and this, and that type of stuff. And then I really take it out there and, as a project manager, right, we have field staff as well. So a lot of times it's, utilizing it, showing my field guys that it can be useful. And then a lot of times I kind of do some of the training for them as well, right, on how are they able to use it. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make it out of the job sites as often as what I might want to, but they're there all the time. So, being able to get them excited about the technology, how to utilize the technology. So it really needs to be something that's pretty simple to be able to use. And, Construction Site's one that we've used to be able to really kind of pinpoint the places that we're taking the photos. So you can go back and be like, all right, well, this was done here. Here's all this stuff and that type of stuff. So that's kind of the way that I utilize it as that. And then also try to find other case uses for it as well, right? So, yeah, it can be done for X, Y, and Z, but is there an B and C that it can be used for as well, and that type of stuff. And so that's really what I like to be able to do is to figure out other ways to be able to utilize it, not just the ways that we kind of that might be marketed for, but then what are some additional ways, because that's just additional money savings that we're able to use is to be able to utilize it on other aspects of it.
I mean, even from the field side, right? So, you're probably getting approached with technology all the time. It's like, hey, do you want to try this out? But, with the acquisition of Construction Site and Drone Deploy kind of, starting to move towards this unified platform, right? Like having both in one, like, does that resonate with you? Like, honestly, yes or no? Like, does it matter or what?
I mean, any way that you can always combine to make it a little bit simpler, like it's easier for us, right? So now it's no longer two things that I have to do. I don't have to go to Construction Site and I don't have to go to Drone Deploy. I can go to one place and be able to do it. So anytime it's more easily kind of incorporated into something that can be done, simultaneously, it saves time, saves money, right? It's one of those things. So that can definitely be useful as far as that goes.
So micropilot's done. Todd, here's some feedback. Here's kind of what we're seeing. Maybe some non-traditional value things that were great. Comes back into your desk. Like, now what do we do with it? We're talking with sales maybe a little bit. We're talking with other customers, hearing what their kind of uses are, basically saying, hey, this is a good tool. What's kind of next for you?
Yeah, for us then it's kind of coming up with that deployment plan. How do we scale it? What does that look like? We start to get other parties involved. Our operations side, how do we build this into an existing process? How is that accessed? What's the, how are we going to obtain the equipment or the assets? And then the big one is the training piece for us, is like coming up with what that training plan is, because we learned pretty early, and this is another one of those tips for people who are kind of setting down this path. Make a plan for how you're going to implement it, because there are so many, I can give you so many examples of where we had really great technology and we got it and we bought it And then it kind of just sat on the shelf because nobody was really seeing it through. And so to really get that adoption rate up and really get people engaged and leveraging it and being able to have someone like David who's bringing the ideas back to you, you really have to have that plan that sees it all the way through, and then kind of keeping your finger on the pulse. After it's launched and going, you're like, okay, cool, we're done, yay.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're not done. You still got to check in. You still got to keep your finger on it. And so for us, that's a big piece, is that training component. So we've really been focusing on that for a lot of stuff.
I'd be curious to hear more about like that feedback loop, right? Like the internal marketing of what's getting released now, what's getting better to the teams, but also from the teams, like getting that feedback back to you and kind of
is that this sounds such a silly question. Is that a like natural thing that just happens when, hey, you guys are crossing desks? Is there like some structure to like, hey, like you have PM meetings and suit meetings and, town halls and things like that, but like what are the ways in which that feedback is happening?
I know at least for us, our field guys definitely let us know if they find things useful or if they find things a waste of time and that type of stuff. So it's not hard getting the feedback from the field. And then I think, there's great communication amongst our VDC and our project managers and that type of stuff. So I think it's pretty natural that the feedback just comes back to y'all on what's working, what's not working, what's some changes, what's something different that we need to look at doing as far as that goes.
Yeah, we definitely hear back when it's not quicker than we do when it is.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we're like, if we don't hear back, we're like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That means things are going. But it is getting that feedback loop. And something we're building now as part of our process is kind of at the end of the job, getting like a kind of just a closeout. Like, hey, how did it go? We implemented this, and this, or we used this, and this on this project. Was it? What was the value there? What were any issues that didn't work, or things that you thought were going to work that didn't, or things we could do better? And so we just continue to try to, sharpen that blade a little bit more every time, and refine it, and then say, well, maybe this isn't the right tool. Maybe we need to go back and look what else is out there, because this just isn't doing it for us. So we've had to do that too.
So you got it on a couple jobs. You got a plan together. You're kind of walking through. All right, jobs are finishing up. You're getting kind of that feedback loop. What are some of the like metrics? Because I want to kind of maybe diverge a little bit into the, hey, I see this as a line to some of the exec team. Hey, I see this as a line item. We're paying for it. Maybe IT sees it, ops sees it. It's going into rates. It's hitting job. Like, how do you answer those questions to folks as this is kind of starting to take off and grow?
Yeah, so being able to track usage, track adoption is definitely key as well. So something we do is same kind of thing. What technologies are we using on those jobs? Something we just did recently was to start to plug those metrics for every single project, and for everybody to be able to see that, and then creating really like a report on that on a quarterly basis to kind of understand. And I'd say the other thing is creating kind of those goals. For us, each office is a little bit different types of projects, different size, different clients. Coming up with what are the kind of the technology or the construction technology goals specifically for that office, and saying, is it really to implement more 360 cameras? Is it more drones? Like, what are we looking to do? And kind of, what is that tangible goal? Like, we want to hit, we want to make sure that we're deploying a greater percentage of drones on jobs, by the end of the year, whatever it is, to be able to actually see that and say, how are we tracking? We always say, measure what matters. I think was a book that we read about that. It's kind of being able to understand, if you're not tracking it, then how are you going to know? If you're not getting that scorecard, how are you going to know where you are? So that helps us kind of keep our finger on it.
Do you think metrics, because we've heard this many, many times, like metrics are just one of the basic indicators of like, dude, you're either using it or you're not.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you're going to have stories and they're going to be great and you can get quotes from different people. But I want to talk about metrics and how important it is that you can kind of, let's just say self-consume them. You don't have to go to the software to ask for reports and like get, all that information. Like, how important are customer-facing dashboards to you guys at a project level of knowing like, hey, are we actually using this, and at a kind of corporate level?
Yeah, I'd say at the corporate level, definitely just to understand, are we doing a good job with supporting the teams? Are we doing a good job with the training and the rollout and putting the tools in their hands for us to kind of report on ourselves. I think that's really how we use it at the high level. I don't know, Dave, on your side, project level.
Yeah, I mean, the usage, when you take a look at it. So I guess kind of way I kind of look at it is how many projects am I asking to go work on? And just the usage alone, right? So we have way more drone pilots that are on sites now. Just about most of our projects, I believe, have them, at least our large projects.
Yep.
And so, for me, I'm able to see the usage because I'm not being asked to go fly a project or something like that. We have a drone pilot that's already on there that's able to do it. So you definitely see that usage being utilized because other people are getting the training and they're being implemented onto the projects and that type of stuff.
So let's kind of categorize this into reality capture a little bit more specifically. Like, what are some of those key usage metrics per reality capture? Meaning, like, what have you guys found success in? Like, hey, if a job is capturing it monthly, bi-monthly, weekly, daily, like, let's just talk about capture frequency for a second. Like, where have you guys kind of landed with that? Having seen this across so many different jobs from both the ground and the air, like, what's ideal for a capture frequency that you guys have seen?
I know for us, it's more on like a weekly basis as far as it goes. So being able to have the maps or the photos and that type of stuff. And some of it will depend on the size of the projects as well, right? One of our interior projects that has a much faster pace may need to capture things a little bit more quickly, right? So maybe it's not a drone with them, but it's one of the 360 cameras to be able to capture the rooms and how they're progressing and that type of stuff. And that could be a daily aspect that goes along with it. Some of the projects that I've been on, it's a 2-year project, right? So maybe at the beginning of it, a daily isn't one of those things. Closer to a weekly, maybe a bi-weekly or that type of stuff. So a lot of it depends on the size and the pace at which that project's going to move as to what your capture frequency may need to be.
Yeah, for me, it's, looking specifically at how many jobs are leveraging it. And similar type of thing, I'd say weekly, how many photos, when I go on a look, it's like, gosh, this project had, 3,000 photos taken over the last so many months. Like, that's a lot of data, as opposed to the ones that are maybe, a couple hundred. And it's like, well, what's going on there? So that gives us a kind of a key indicator to kind of touch base and be like, a lot of times we're using it just for one specific point in the project. And that's it's like, well, we just needed it for this one instance, a pre-cover, or a pre, a post-punch, kind of thing to capture. Here's how the building looks. We're done. We can always go back and see where things were. And so that's been big for us.
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of think of like your guys' jobs as almost like auditing the job. Like, hey, like from a technology standpoint, it's like, we don't want to just have stuff on this job that's not getting used. Like, that's pointless. Like, we're paying for something. No one loves paying for something, and at the end,
right.
Like, do we even use this? But I'm curious too. Do you have any thoughts or questions you want to add to that?
In a different way, but yeah, you go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to ask, but go for it.
Well, I specifically wanted to talk about approaching technology by market sector, right? Like your hospital projects versus your commercial. Like, I mean, how do you kind of break up?
I like the recipe example. You got to explain the recipe.
Yeah,
the ingredients
let's go
and recipe.
That.
This is gold off air, and I hate that we didn't have it record, but
it's always off air. That's why.
No, I mean, this kind of came up just from us going around. We're in the middle of a big initiative that we started a couple years ago called VDC Reconstructed here at Choate that has lots of different initiatives that kind of spun off of that. But the whole idea was basically to put these tools into our team's hands. We've had these great VDC managers or VDC team that we're out flying the drone, we're out taking the photos, and we're like, wait a minute, and I think it was one of the superintendents asked us like, hey, well, can you just leave that thing here and I'll fly it when I need to use it? And we're like, why aren't we doing that? Like, that's so, like, duh. And so as we started doing more of that, then we started getting to the point where project teams were saying, well, I want to have that technology, or I want to have that camera on my site. Well, it wasn't thought about early enough in the project. We didn't plan for it in the budget, or, we got feedback from our superintendents saying, I would love to use this stuff, but the project's DOA when it's it's my job. I can't implement it. And so we started thinking about was like, well, how can we create kind of a playbook, or what we just called the VDC cookbook is where it kind of started.
I love this.
And the idea was that all these tools are essentially the ingredients. And 360 cameras, is like the eggs, and the laser scanners like the flour. And so then you would look at the individual project types, so senior living or a hospitality or whatever it is, industrial project, and say, okay, well, for that particular type of project or that sector, we want to leverage scanning for this, and we want to use the 360 for that, and we want to use the drones for this. And that kind of creates your recipe. So your recipe is essentially the project type, and your ingredients are basically the technologies. And so the idea is that then you can almost create these, a cookbook, if you will, a VDC cookbook that shows you what and how to leverage on the projects that we can then hand to someone like David and said, here's where you should be using it on this project. Here's some other things that are available that maybe you are not the absolutes, like we talked about, like what are the things you absolutely should be doing on the job. And that's another thing that I would say about kind of implementing this type of stuff. You have to get to the mentality where this is not optional. These are the things we have to be doing on every single project, or if this type of project, every single job needs to have this done. And it's not an optional thing, because if it's left to be optional, it's like, well, we didn't do it like that the last time. Well, let's do it. We don't have to really do it this time. So that starts to change the culture and the mentality.
Yeah. I'm curious though on that front of like not making it optional can come across as like, hey, that's like very authoritative. Obviously, that's not what you guys have found here. Like, does that mindset shift? Obviously, it happens a lot over time, but like, how do you go from hey, you need to do this, to them being like, hey, I want to do this. Like, hey, can you leave that equipment here for us to do more frequently? Like,
again, it goes back to showing the value. Really goes back to showing, and so we created a program we rolled out middle of last year called Contech, which is an internal certification program. So we have 4 different levels of certification for our employees. They come in and get kind of a fundamental level training that's kind of self-paced on our LMS or learning management system. And then the actual Contech training to get certified is hands-on on the job training. And so we're doing it either in the office, at the job site, small group, hands-on. You're capturing for your project for you to use. And that's when people start to go, oh man, God, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And so that starts to change that culture. And so you start to go away from, this is just the way that we do work. And our leadership understands that, and they say, this is the way we build, so that changes it.
I love how you subtly kept in there, that's the way our leadership team like approaches it. Because
I love that mentality, because it's just like safety, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Your trade partners come in, do the safety training. I throw in a video and I leave. Like, that just shows like your approach to like, all right, check the box, video's done. Right? It's like the same thing with this first day you join that company. Having technology be one of the 4 even certification sectors that you can have is a true story of like, this is part of the culture here, and it's more about efficiency rather than, we do technology, we do BIM, throwing it on a pamphlet.
It's fascinating. You just made me think of something of like, I've never related technology to safety in that way, where it's like, I mean, think about it. Like EMR, perfect example of like what obviously like clients look and kind of rate you at from your safety perspective. There's not really a technology EMR rating, right? Other than, hey, would you use them on the next job, and did you like the tools that they were bringing forth? But yeah, it's a really interesting analogy of like, it's something, technology can be used as a recruiting tactic, and then you get in the door and you're like, well, wait, you guys don't train me on this. You don't like walk me through what this means to actually do on a job.
And our VDC, the whole reconstructed initiative was really kind of the inspiration of it was our safety program. So when we rolled out One Life years and years and years ago, and I was like, man, this is awesome. It really did. Like, it changed the complete culture of how we approach safety and how we want everybody to go home at the end of the day. And everybody does. Every construction company is going to tell you that, But it really becomes to the point where when I drive home, I know that me picking up my cell phone, I mean, we just talked about this in our staff meeting the other day, like, that's unsafe. Like, if I don't get home to my kids and my family, like, they're dependent upon me. So it changes your mentality. And so when I saw how our safety team implemented that, I was like, God, that's awesome. Like, they changed the culture. Like, how do we do this with VDC? How do we do this with these technologies? And so years and years ago, this was probably 5 years ago when we first kind of, this whole concept was initially birthed. We were like, I went to our safety director at the time and said, tell me how you did it.
Everything.
Like, tell me how you did this. And he literally did. He's like, it's there's no secret sauce. It's like anybody can do it. You know, there are very specific steps that you have to follow through and to get that to work. But that was big for us.
That's fascinating.
But it is an entire company initiative, right? It's not just the safety.
Absolutely,
It's not just the safety guy telling everyone to put their PPE on. It's the most senior superintendent hitting sites like, what are you doing?
It's ownership. It's ownership.
Ownership.
It's people taking ownership of it for themselves.
This is a super dumb question, but I'm like, okay, my mind's kind of racing here, thinking about like, because like safety in a way really does uniquely connect the leadership team of a company and the operations level of out in the field getting the work done. Why hasn't technology, like, so go down your guys' track, hey, let's follow the playbook of safety, what they do, the initiatives, and bringing that to, like, why hasn't technology kind of found that opportunity to be similar in safety? Does that make sense? Like, I've never heard that analogy before, but it like makes perfect sense that that's what's helped kind of blend these two executive level and field levels together.
Yeah, I think it's, part of it is understanding that how it helps them, I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's that, right? Like, so construction, very different generations that come through, right? So our field guys are typically some of our more senior guys that have been here for a while. And so technology may be something that's a little bit fearful for them, right? Like they don't necessarily understand how to utilize it. They, may not understand how it can be utilized in that type of stuff. And then some of the younger guys are able to show them, or once you're able to give them kind of like a way that is going to be able to be utilized. I think that's how that type of thing gets incorporated in, right? Everybody can understand safety, right? So you going home to your family, everybody kind of understands that. But then the technology component is, how is this going to save me time? How is this going to make my life easier and that type of stuff? And that's what, to me, I think has taken a little bit more time for some of our field guys to kind of wrap their heads around on how they're going to be able to utilize it. And, I know my superintendent that's currently on my project now, he's wholeheartedly around the technology component. I get text messages like, hey, where's my drone deploy map? I'm like, well, it's still processing. Just give it a second, right? It's one of those things.
Faster product.
Right?
Yeah, we gotta cut that one out, but yeah.
Edit.
So, and it's just one of those things that, right, once they see the benefits of using the technology and how they can utilize it, it really opens up their eyes to be able to leverage it. Now, it may not be necessarily something that they utilize or that they're doing, but they want somebody on their team to be able to do it. Because, again, some guys just can't quite figure some things out.
I think you're right. Like the safety piece is very natural for them. They know how to operate, safely. But the technology piece, it's a little bit more hesitant, at least for more of the senior. But now, we have all these younger folks that are coming into the industry and are more adapt to the technology. I mean, they just are picking it up quick.
It's so fascinating. Like everyone gets safety, and then on the technology side, I don't know why this theme is this like quality of life. I mean, it really is like when you think about how hard a construction job is and the grind, and it starts out and you hit your groove and then you're finishing up and you want to get done. Like
I'm going to say, honestly, it's probably just like bad marketing, honestly, around technology, because technology was always seen as like this replacer, not an augmenter. Right. And, you talk to people in the field, it's like, all right, yeah, tell me how that drone's going to build this high rise, because I can bet my money that, it'll help me, but it's not going to replace me, because there's so many technical things that you need to know to execute something like that. And I would say, like, safety is something that is, a very understood thing. Technology is one of those things where it's like, depending on what sector of the technology world you look in, it's like, oh yeah, we can automate, checking your RFIs, or we can automate all these things. It's like the word automation to me is kind of
fuzzy.
It's fuzzy, right? Because it's like
It is
automation to
true.
help me or to replace me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, maybe talk about that a little bit, about like how it's technology is augmenting your teams. Like when you guys hear technology and quality of life, like what is that? How does that sound to y'all? Like, is that accurate? Because I do in some ways agree with Brian. Like technology can, we from the software side can try to make it as flashy as it is, right? And like you need to use this if you don't have the latest and greatest. But like at the end of the day, you guys are the decision makers, and like, what are we doing? Is this going to help? And is it going to be a better, like when you hear quality of life, like what is that? Does that resonate? Is that maybe a marketing thing that technology could be doing better of like, hey, look at how this is helping the quality of life of your staff? Or is that too like bold of a?
I mean, it's just like construction is, some of the best people in construction, are just great storytellers.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And it's just like the storytelling in the field office. So I just don't think that story like has a very clear storytelling, like emotional connection to it. It's very more cold than anything. It's like, it's very like showing a product, but it's not showing somebody's saving hours and being able to go home earlier in the day, or, being able to focus more on other things. So I think it's a two-way relationship. You need someone that has open ears to receive the story, but is the story going to be good to begin with? And I think that's what we're kind of doing with this podcast is like, we didn't want to just record you saying, oh, these are the benefits we found, right?
Yeah.
Just talking about your journey. That's pretty much what we're trying to do.
Is quality of life a good story to tell? Is how this enhances your guys' team's ability to become better builders, leave sooner to go home and be with their family? Like, is that the right story? Or can it be the right? Maybe that's too bold. Like, can it be the right story?
I mean, I think it needs to be part of the story, right?
Sure.
Because, I mean, it's, our field guys are the ones that really drive a lot of our projects and stuff like that. And, they're probably the ones that, I wouldn't say have the worst quality of life or anything like that, right? But they're the ones that are on the site. They're the ones that are in the weather and that type of stuff. And that's a lot of what they have to deal with. So, them having an understanding of how this can make something either easier on them or it can make something better or that type of stuff. I think it's a good story to be able to tell them because, Todd and myself and that type of stuff, telling them that this needs to be used, but them really adopting it is one of those things that makes it more, I guess, utilized throughout our company, is when our field guys can talk to each other, because we have superintendent meetings and stuff like that, and them being able to tell a story on how they utilize it is going to resonate a lot more with that other superintendent versus the project manager telling them a story or something like that, and they're like, oh, well, you don't understand, right? Like, you're just in the office, like you don't really understand what it's like to be out here in the field. But having somebody else that's lived and breathed and utilized that, I think that can definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, I would say definitely it's definitely part of it. I think it's also our field teams look at they look at these as tools. It's no different than any of the other tools that they have on site. And so if you said, is that, new, whatever it is, Lowell gonna make your quality of life better? It's like, well, maybe. Yeah, I don't have to manually carry that stuff around the site anymore. That's kind of nice. But at the same time, I think a lot of our project teams, and I definitely, this hits at the heart of it. Project managers get a lot of us, but the guys that are out there, busting it on the site and the weather and the cold, day in, day out, early days, late nights kind of thing. I think that's really where we make the greatest impact on their quality of life. And I think just talking with a lot of our superintendents about after they've leveraged the tool, they see that it's making not only their life a little bit better, but it's making the project better. It's making because that's their trophy, right? I mean, they do all this so that at the end of the day they can look back and say, wow, look at this thing. There was nothing here before. Look what I've created. And if it made that, that end, that example a little bit better, then I think that is something they want to strive for.
Well said.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating because Brian and I obviously see a lot of different like marketing messages and tactics, and that's not our backgrounds. We came from the field. Like, we came from being customers of these tools, and like, I think maybe the last question I have, and we'll kind of wrap things up too, is like, what's the compelling why that you tell some of those folks as they're going through those certifications, right? Like, we're sitting here saying like, hey, this helping your life, better quality of life.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are saying to those folks like, hey, you need to use this because this is a part of our culture, this is part of our team and our process. But like, what's the extra kind of oomph to get them over that hump of like, okay, I'm being told to do this, but I want to like tell myself I need to do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's, we've talked a lot about that. Like, you know, the context certification program is voluntary currently, you know, for us. We're not forcing people to do it. It's on their own, because it makes them a better employee. It makes them more valuable. You know, looking at, well, hey, there's a really complicated project that we need to leverage these types of tools, and well, you're not certified to do that kind of stuff. So you're not going to be on that really cool new project that we've got. And so I think some of that, it's kind of their own self-motivation for their own personal goals, and achieving where they want to be. And for us, I think we know that technology or construction is changing, how we build buildings. That the way that we built buildings 10 years ago is not how we're going to build, you know, how we're doing it now, or even how we're going to do it, you know, 15, 20 years from now. And so we understand that if you look at those companies that didn't evolve, you know, think about the Blockbusters, think about all these other companies that are out there, right? They didn't evolve and they don't exist because they didn't keep up with what's happening. And so for us to remain relevant, and to keep up with the industry and keep up with the future, we have to do this. And so those are kind of some of the main reasons we felt we needed to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, just for me, it's the why, right? So everybody's why is a little bit different. So why this person may want to utilize or incorporate this may be a little bit different than somebody else's why. And I, you know, as my role, I feel like that's part of to get their buy-in, right, is to understand their why. Like, what's some frustrations that they've had? How can this technology make that a little bit easier for them? So maybe it was, like you said, some of the cover-ups, right, of having to go back and remove entire walls because nobody knew where outlets were, or junction boxes were, and that type of stuff. And now they can go back and pull up a picture and be like, oh, okay, it's going to be 3 feet up, 6 inches to the left of this, or whatnot. And then they can pull it up, and that makes it that easier for them. So that's less of a headache for them, whereas somebody else, it could be something else. And that's, to me, how, you know, we get that buy-in and we have the purpose behind the things. It's that why. And for, like I said, for everybody, it's a little bit different.
I have some final question thoughts. You got it? You good? Okay, cool. One question I've been asking, and we'll wrap it up kind of here. You guys have been so gracious with your time. Thank you guys for making so much time. What would you tell some folks that are on the fence about some of this stuff? Like, you guys have obviously had the, let's just say, sponsorship or buy-in from your exec teams and folks at that level, leadership level, and you've obviously gotten to see it at the project levels too. Like, what advice would you give to anyone that's like, yeah, I'm hearing this, but how do I take that next step? Like, what do I do with this? Because I'm either stuck, or I'm either frustrated, or I'm like tired, and I don't know if this is actually going to go anywhere. Like, maybe Todd, at your level, like, what would you encourage folks at like an executive level and above, maybe trying to communicate that value up the chain to some folks?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is success stories of other companies, talking to other folks in the industry, talking to even your competitors, like, that have maybe done it, and getting feedback from them, and being able to say, you know, going to your leadership teams and saying, you know, I've researched this. This is what it is. This is the value I think it brings. And here's some examples of others that are like us that have done it. And I'm not crazy. You know, this will actually work, kind of thing. I think that's you know, a good starting place. And start small. You know, start small, and make decisions quickly, because, like I said, don't waste your time if it's going to be this long, drawn-out process. That's why we really like those small, just quick tests. Like, let's get our hands on it. Let's try it out. See if the value is there. What can we do with it? How does it work? Okay, can we leverage this on a larger scale?
Yeah, I mean, to me, if somebody's on the fence, I would just say to try it, right? Like, you don't have to have entire company buy-in on something necessarily. So maybe you try it on one project where you get something to be able to utilize that technology or something like that. Because most people know where they've had some headaches, right? So look at that headache, look at the technology that's out there, and then try it. and that's going to be the only way to really show that it can be beneficial is for you to actually try it.
Thank you again so much for hosting us. I feel like Brian and I have been on the road and finding offices to shack up at. So thank you guys for hosting. And I swear I've been looking up at these screens so much too. And I love the social media ones too. Those are cool for people that have tagged y'all. So thank you guys again. This has been really fun.
Thanks for coming.
Todd, David, thank you guys for having us. This has been great. Thank you guys for listening with us here on this episode. We look forward to catching you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Make sure to subscribe to Built Different on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Let's build this community together.